Hey, we are live for another Friday evening with Dr. Politics and the Political Architect Show. We are the Fantastic Four today. We are joined by Joey Lynn, Invisible Girl Huff, Frederick County, one of the few red counties in the great state of Maryland. Joey Lynn is a member of the Central Committee there, and in her spare time, Joey Lynn likes to go shooting and singing the praises of fracking because it works for North Dakota. Welcome, Joey Lynn.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being on with all of you.
And then we have Jeffrey the Thing Thornton from Howard County. Jeff is an IT guru security expert. And in his spare time, he likes to put things together or Lego things together and stuff like that and take apart computers and put them back together again. And then he has 4 or 5 pieces left over afterwards. Then we have Don Reed Richards Irvine, Mr. Fantastic himself, media watchdog. He's been keeping an eye on the liberal media and been spotting fake news since the 1960s. Welcome, Don.
Okay. Well, my father started that, but hey, okay.
It's all good. It's all in the family.
It's all in the family. Yeah,
a great show too, by the way, which is on. You can catch on Get TV. But anyway, so we had a very busy week this week. We had a lot of fun stuff happening. We have evidently we're a couple days away from his fraudulencies fake swearing in that's starting up next week. And they did. We had a few this week. We also had Nancy Pelosi issue an ultimatum saying invoke the 25th Amendment or we'll impeach. And guess what? They got sent up another fake impeachment. And with that, I will let Mr. Fantastic Don Irvine take over.
All right, so we'll take it kind of from there. Let's talk about the impeachment, or I guess Dwight put it down as impeachment 2.0. So we have President Trump about to leave office, but he will become the only president in U.S. history to have been impeached twice. I would think that generally the panel here probably thinks that neither impeachment was probably justified in any way, shape, or form. And this one certainly wasn't, in my opinion. This was a very rushed through thing. They used the excuse of the riots and the incite that President Trump incited the rioters to do what they did last week. This is just out and out bitterness and revenge and whatever else you want to call it on the part of Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats to go after President Trump before he leaves office. As Dwight has also alluded to, we have the 25th Amendment thrown in there, trying to put some pressure on Mike Pence. The 25th Amendment would not have applied in this situation. It is just, the Democrats and their behavior this past week has just been absolutely ridiculous. So where are we going, guys? What's your opinion?
I will start off. I'll say one. They are using the riots of last week to blame, which I find, I'm a law and order guy, okay? The hypocrisy I'm seeing on CNN, MSNBC, NBC, all the broadcasts, the Washington Post, the New York Times, how they are so outraged by these riots. Wow, cities burned over this summer. And what were we told by mayors like Muriel Bowser and that woman in Baltimore City, I forget her name, Dixon. There's a
Sheila Dixon.
Give them space. They're angry. Let them have some space to loot and, and honestly, I think those guys should all have been prosecuted. The FBI should have put them on the most wanted list, like they did to the folks that went to the Capitol, and went inside. My feeling is this is going to come back to bite the Democrats sooner rather than later, because I know they all talk. I know Joe right now, Joe talks about this is not unifying people. All this is done now is people have dug in their heels. There is nothing we will ever support Joe Biden for. Republicans, then this is going to be, and I have a feeling they're going to overreach within the first 100 days. And I'm going out on a limb here, but Joe Manchin flips over to our side and we take the majority in the Senate.
A bold prediction.
Jeff, Joe Lynn.
Yeah, so I guess, obviously this has been historic times as far as unprecedented in some cases. I tend to, again, be the kind of a moderate as far as my views go here. Obviously, impeachment is a political tool. So whether it's used by the right or the left, I mean, it's always for political ends. As far as the legitimacy of it, the thing is, you know, Trump, at the very least, chose his words carefully. So whether he incited anything by innuendo versus like his actual actions, the thing is, any court trying to actually, you know, try Trump on what he said, like freedom of speech versus I forget what the term is, the legal term for riling people up, but you know, they would not find him guilty for that. But that being said, you know, because the Democrats have a majority in the House, they can run up the flag and you know, get people, you know, on support for it. It's really, I think, more of just a show at this point. I mean, whether it's legitimate or not, it's just both sides kind of, I think, puffing out the chest, saying, "Hey, look at us, look at us." I don't approve. I don't think that it's necessary. It certainly doesn't solve anything. The only thing I've heard that makes sense at all is the fact that if they're going to try and keep Trump from being elected or being a candidate for the 2024s, if he is impeached and found by the Senate to, you know, to be impeached, whatever, then he can't hold an office. So that's the only thing I can think of as far as the actual end game for this. But yeah, it's just, I think, a lot of just then he can't hold an office. So that's the only thing I can think of as far as the actual end game for this.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was trying to get the watch party started. Anyways, but we were back to where
Jeff
we're
just hear himself again.
I don't like hearing myself.
So anyways, Jeff, before I broke your train of thought.
Yeah, no, so I think it's, again, it's hard for me to take a middle position because, like you said, is that everyone is kind of like gathering their forces on their own side. So I think the Democrats are trying to, you know, gather their forces. The Republicans are trying to gather their forces. You know, there is no like middle party politics going on anymore. It's really just one side versus the other. And I really hate that the Senate especially has devolved into, you know, filibusters and two-thirds majority to pass anything. I mean, the only thing we got passed of note, you know, last session was the huge, you know, omnibus package would include everything, which, you know, they kind of threw everything under the bus and said, okay, we got to pass something, otherwise we'll get paid. So they had this 5,000 page document that nobody's really had time to review, and it just gets passed because they have to. That's not the kind of politics I want to be a part of. I don't think that benefits either side. But I think that's kind of how we've devolved into recently. So,
Joey Lynn, you're an ardent supporter of President Trump. I mean, you must have some opinions here.
I have several opinions about this. Number one, look, we are the only people, like, I'm in control of my own behavior. I can't control anyone else's behavior but my own. So if somebody tells me to go do something or not do something, that doesn't mean that I'm going to go do something, X, Y, or Z, or not do it. The only person that controls me is me. So if you believe that Trump incited people to go into the Capitol and storm the Capitol and do criminal behavior, then that's your opinion. I'm not going to change your opinion about that. I don't believe he did, and I don't believe the media gave him a fair shot. I believe they do slicing of his clips of his speeches, and the media incites violence. Not only that, but if you look at everything that has happened over the summer, maybe 9 months to a year now, the left has done nothing but incite, and the media has done nothing but incite violence. They're the ones who have told their supporters to go and, you know, spit in people's faces. Don't let them dine out. People have been harassed and terrorized.
I mean, remember, go ahead.
And, you know, for 9 months or more, actually 4 to 5 years, they've done awful things to Trump supporters. And it has been at the behest of the Democrats and the Democrat leaders in Congress today. So that's, you know, they want to talk about inciting violence. They're the ones who incited violence, and the media has been complicit in it for many years. So I'm saying that this impeachment of Trump is it's unconstitutional. and I'm sure the first one was unconstitutional as well. You can't just go from, we have a constitution that says we're proven innocent before, we're innocent before proven guilty. Clearly now we have lost all sight of the Constitution, and we're able to, you are now guilty, and it's up to you to prove that you're innocent. I mean, that's not how our Constitution was written. So both impeachments are a sham. It's, hey, don't worry about what I'm doing over here. Don't pay attention, but I'm over here, inciting riots and carrying on. That's the left. That's not us. We are law-abiding citizens, and I don't believe in this. This is not unifying the country. If they want to unify the country, impeaching Trump is not going to do it. And invoking the 25th Amendment, Vice President Mike Pence, is a stand-up, honorable guy. He's not going to do it, and he realizes that this is going to be very bad for America.
Mm-hmm. And here's also, as one CNN reporter said over the summer, who says protests have to be peaceful? Remember that? Who says, we have to be orderly? I mean,
wasn't that Chris Cuomo said that?
Yes. And and the audacity of these people attacking, Republicans for one incident, while all summer long, there's people who are now homeless in Seattle because of the Republic of Kazakhstan, basically decided to move in. I mean, they had a siege of the Seattle Police Department for how many months this summer? I think it was at least 3 months, 4 months, these guys, and the audacity about them saying, we're treason. Nancy Pelosi, I hate to say it, not to be that. Every time I hear Nancy Pelosi, this was treasonous and misdemeanor. I want to come over and tell her, and shove a copy of the Washington Times or Wall Street Journal or New York Post in her face and read this, you dumb woman. She is like the dumbest woman in Washington right now, because I think Hillary is in the Chappaqua Woods right now walking around. So
what you guys have said is all very good, actually. I mean, a lot of good points. I mean, I don't think there's anybody on this panel, maybe Jeff, who actually trusts the media very much, right?
I take it with a grain of salt. I mean, I think every outlet has their own agenda. You just have to understand what it is. So the left has their agenda, the right has their agenda. Everyone wants to get the clicks. Everyone gets the notice. So I try to take it with a grain of salt. Whatever they say is like, if they have backing up stuff, I understand, like, to Joey's point, they take sound bites. They want to get the stuff is juicy and use it against whatever their thing is. So
yeah, I mean,
you don't get full context in the news.
Yeah, it's red meat. It's how they whip up a frenzy, whip up their base, whip up their supporters against one another. And if you know the Constitution, you know that this is a written document, and they're not following what our founding fathers wrote in the Constitution. And that's a real big problem for every single American. It doesn't matter if you're Republican or Democrat. It's a problem for every American, whether the media says it or the left says it or the right says it. It's a problem, because if they're not going to adhere to that document, we are in real trouble here in America. And that is what has been happening.
Right. And, we talked here about trying to compare what happened last week to what happened last summer with all the, all the marches, all the BLM movement, everything like that, from George Floyd, all the things that happened during the past summer. What was interesting is when you listen to the Chris Cuomos or the Don Lemons, to the sports stars, LeBron James and all these people, and they have tried to rationalize this thing, saying that was all in the name of racial injustice. So basically, that's okay, right? Last week, it was a different thing. It's Donald Trump. It's his supporters. That's not okay. I mean, none of us are going to excuse the behavior of those people who did what they did last week on the Capitol. They committed a crime. I mean, and there was arrests that have been made. They're going to be commissioned. There's going to be some jail time by this. Some of these people are just outright stupid. Okay, just completely stupid. Plus, you have that one guy who wants the QAnon guy who wants Trump to pardon him. It's like, give me a break.
I mean, we are a party of law-abiding citizens, and we cannot condone what has happened over the summer, the 9 months, or what happened at the Capitol. None of it is, it's criminal. And
That's,
that is what the point is. It's just so frustrating. I find it to be very frustrating. The hypocrisy of the left and the media is astounding. You know, you can't say, oh, well, they have the right to the First Amendment, you know, to their free speech and to assemble and protest and carry on, and they have the right to express themselves when, oh, but if you're a Trump supporter, you cannot, no, you can't express yourself. Meanwhile, they're literally attacking people who wear anything Trump related, who, can I tell you how many times I've been harassed being a Trump supporter when I was Trump supporter from the very beginning?
no.
I've spent
You mean to
4
tell me that?
years of being harassed and terrorized, and I had to get a protection order against a man who was very crazy in his car and harassed and stalked me. It was awful. It was an awful situation. And going to court was awful. It was not fun at all. And men have tried to run me off the road because I had a Trump bumper sticker on my car.
How many of your
And
signs were burned, by the way, or stolen? Can you count, or is it too many to count your yard signs being stolen?
Well, that's so, they never stole my Trump signs until 2 days after the election, which is so ironic. And then they vandalized my house,
Yeah.
you know,
But
and
to
then
your
they
point,
terrorized my kids in school. And, you know, so I just find it to be hypocritical that they want to say, you know, they have all these signs up in their yards to say that there's no hate here, really, and that they're the tolerant party. That is hypocritical, and that's a bold-faced lie. They're not the party of tolerance. They're not the party with no hate here, because that's all that has been expressed to me in the last 4 years is nothing but intolerance and hate. And they have, I lost my election, and they did awful things to me when I ran for city council. And the city actually did, they passed an ordinance to silence my First Amendment rights, to say that I can't give the perception that I'm a Republican or any way partisan. They can charge me with a misdemeanor. They can remove me from the ticket. Really?
Yeah, it's almost criminal, frankly, you know, that they would do that. I mean, you know, we do still have a First Amendment in America, even though if you're running for a nonpartisan race, you can. I mean, are the Democrats stopping? I mean, the Democrats are giving, are talking, spewing their lefty rhetoric, you know, and I think there are two sets of rules, you know, as it's good to be a Democrat, as Chris Plant would say. You know, they change the rules as they go. It's 5 downs to get to a first down for Democrats. It's 4 strikes and you're out for Democrats, or keep swinging until you hit the ball. It's probably more like what the Democrats' rule is. You know, then they can't seem to get them, you know, get over themselves, and the holier than thou attitude they have is the worst, I think, where they are like, oh my God, they're breaking into the Capitol building. You know, where were you when they were stealing flat screen TVs over the summer, you know, and looting and rioting and burning down businesses in their neighborhoods?
Well, that's what they said was their reparations.
Yeah, right.
That was one of the comments that was made. Those are my reparations. Really? No, that's theft.
Yeah.
That's, you know, that's criminal behavior. And the fact that, you know, now we're supposed to bail out all these, you know, these cities that BLM and Antifa have literally burned, looted, defaced, torn down statues, and, you know, really drove. It's really, the whole thing is just absolutely awful, because they have literally ruined small businesses and destroyed them as if things weren't bad enough, you know, with COVID. And then we have riots and looters and, you know, all of this. And then you have people who are being harassed and terrorized while they're out to eat with megaphones. I mean, really? Nobody wants to eat anymore.
I mean, remember Sarah Sanders? She went to have dinner, and you had people come up and harass her.
Yeah.
And they happened to Vice President Pence. If you recall, right after they were elected for 4 years ago, 5 years ago now. In November, Vice President and Karen Pence, they went to go see Hamilton. God only knows why they want to go see Hamilton, but they were lectured to by the cast. You know, how dare they, frankly? You know, you guys are, entertainers, you don't see Mike Pence jumping up on stage and start singing, and dancing with you guys. You know, he's going to do his job as vice president. You guys do your own damn jobs as entertainers. You know, you are not, nobody cares what you think, quite frankly. You know, a lot of these Hollywood elitists, and now Macaulay Dorkin evidently wants to take the cameo that the president had in Home Alone, which is like,
But you guys just mentioned, I mean, the First Amendment, which also strikes up another issue that came out as a result of this, is really the deplatforming of the president, losing his ability to use Twitter, access to Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat. I didn't even know he was really doing much on Snapchat, but apparently maybe they just did that as a preventative measure. But
Instagram.
And the thing is just that here's a president, and I give him credit for initially trying to use, after his real Donald Trump account was suspended, that he went to the POTUS account, and then Twitter went immediately kind of shut him down over there too. But what is this saying about the state of America when these big tech companies can come in here and do this? And it does seem to be rather vindictive, in the sense that there are other world leaders that have said some, and are still saying some pretty awful things, and their Twitter accounts are just fine.
The Ayatollah, I forget which, I lost count of the.
I think
it's
Duterte.
Let's just call him Ayatollah Khomeini.
There's a whole list of these people.
Yeah. Putin still has his Twitter account, I bet.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing. It's like, it's like, Russia collusion. It's like spying on Trump's campaign. And then, Russia collusion with the Russian hoax and the doctoring of documents. They had no proof. And to convict someone of a crime, you have to have proof. You have to have actual physical evidence. And they had none, just like this last time they had none. And if you don't think that, it's maddening at this point. They're silencing people's First Amendment rights. And if you don't think it can happen to you, you're wrong.
Let me tell you, I tell you one thing I've noticed, Jolyn, in the past when we were doing our Dr. Politics, I could do a lot. I was able to invite people from the Facebook. It was really easy to do. I could just do it from my second screen, start inviting people to our show. They got rid of that function. Now I got to go to my mobile device. And that's why you guys heard Jeff, because I was starting to invite people to watch our show. And what happens is, Facebook just makes it more and more difficult. I don't know if it happens to everyone. I should do a little test to see if my other Facebook page, they do the same thing about when you do a watch party. But it used to be really nice. You want to invite people to your watch party, just go at the bottom and just start inviting your friends. Now you can't do that.
Well, interesting, Dwight, too. You mentioned about, I mean, I don't want to get off on a tangent, but the whole concept of like digital rights and what do we own in this new economy of like information is really I think a core issue, because when it talks about like the freedom of speech and like public assemblages and such, I mean, what constitutes a public forum? What constitutes a free expression of ideas? Because does it require the government host their own platform for us to use as individuals, or
no? I don't think the government.
Again, there are arguments about what needs to be done. Should the government require that certain services that are made public, kind of like the whole, if a town acts like a government entity by offering a post office, offering malls, then it really should be treated like a government entity. Same thing if like for Twitter, any information utility, if they offer services that that act like free speech, they should be treated to that standard. But again, I don't want to get off that side of that.
But Twitter and Facebook, what they're doing is they're doing editorial control. Like the Washington Post, I don't have any rights to write any articles in the Washington Post because they are a publication, they are a newspaper. And that is exactly how they should treat Twitter, Facebook. If you want to do these editorial controls, fine, do it. Do your editorial controls. But you're not going to get taxpayer protection Section 239 needs to be modified. I think it's 239. Is it
230.
That's 230.
But yeah, and to your point, I mean, yeah, that needs to be considered. But even like, what do we gain? What do we lose when we post information on the platforms? Because Facebook basically says that whatever we post, they own. So when they use our own information, either because we post a picture, something about our status, and they sell information to people who want to gather information for advertising, where does that really fit? There's so many concerns as far as this. I mean, again, I could probably take a whole hour talking about this, but the point is that this highlights the power that big corporations have. The fact that Google, Facebook, Twitter, these are private entities. We've given them the power to do this, and there are no really competing platforms. I mean, yes, in theory you can do your own platform, but in practice, that's like saying, well, you're banned from this newspaper, but you got this newspaper instead. Eventually you run out of newspapers to publish in. And so the same thing with technology. It's like if you don't have an infrastructure like Amazon to host stuff, if you don't have websites you can post stuff, if you don't have app supports from the phone manufacturers, you're really asking someone to reinvent the wheel just to go to the step of having free speech. And that's the level I think nobody could accept.
And here's the thing: is now Google controls upstream and downstream levels of production. They're just like Standard Oil. What I'm saying, where does the Rockefeller family go to get their company back, frankly? If they're going to let Google and Google not be broken up, I think we should reconstitute. AT&T should be brought back together as Ma Bell, and we bring back Standard Oil. Let's find the Rockefeller families and give them their oil rights back. Let's bring ExxonMobil and all the former Standard Oil companies together and reform Standard Oil. I believe U.S. Steel is another one that was broken up by the trust buster himself, Teddy Roosevelt. That pains me, the fact that he was a Republican and he was monkeying around with. But at the end of the day, Google is a monopoly. Google should be broken up. I mean, this is the stuff that I defended Microsoft. Microsoft was never as big as Google is. In the 90s, Don, as you know, I worked with Microsoft with a Coalition for Tax-Free Internet, where actually I would say the late 90s, close to 2000, where all these tech companies were coming to us conservatives, begging us to help them protect their intellectual property rights, protect them from special regulations and taxes. Please protect us from the government. Now what? Now they have basically just bit the hand that fed them. Conservatives are the reason these companies were not regulated by the government, because we went out and we said, do not, people like Jim Sensenbrenner, and Senator Bob Smith would have the bills about keeping the internet free from special taxes, which would allow the industry to grow. And now that it's grown up, they still want those protections. And two, they're now biting all the people that helped them get to where they are. They've forgotten who brought them to the dance, quite frankly.
Your point about Microsoft is interesting, because I always had a problem with the government's attacks on Microsoft back then, because I always felt that they were underestimating Microsoft's heft and its ability. A lot of that argument was really all built around Internet Explorer.
Yep.
Right, which is now what, Edge? But I mean,
nobody uses Edge either, which is funny now.
Look at Google. I mean, you talk about Google. Google is the Uber power when it comes to search engines. They really control a lot. So has big tech?
Well, there's Bing.
Has big tech?
No,
wow,
it's not. But I'm just saying.
Has big tech gotten too big? In that sense. I mean, with the Democrats in control, what are they going to do? Are they going to look favorably or unfavorably at this?
The Democrats are notorious for biting the hands that feed them, so to speak. I can see them going, well, hey, Mr. Dorsey, you're making a lot of money. We need to raise your taxes, and you can pay some special fees for this. And they're going to do this. They're going to say, oh, well, we need to charge you guys a little bit more so we can build up the internet for the rural communities. So folks who live in Martinsburg, West Virginia can have broadband, and they don't have to rely on just Comcast, which is really scary that Martinsburg, West Virginia only has Comcast as their broadband provider. There's no Fios, there's no competitors. And that's, you've got the what do you call it, the downstream folks. I mean, definitely we're lucky. We got RCN, we got FiOS, we have Comcast, and while over in most of us, I mean, in small town USA, there's only one game in town, and they can charge you as much as they want. I remember back in the 80s, late 80s, where they wanted to regulate the cost of cable TV. And I still believe, cable TV is not a right. You can get broadcast over the air television just fine. We grew up without cable TV, Jeff, I don't know if you had cable TV when you were in high school. We didn't get cable TV until after I moved out and went to college, so to speak.
No, I didn't have cable TV. I remember Channel 66 was like one of the few channels I was able to get. My black and white 19-inch TV.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, to your point, it's like, so we need to say just really quickly that imagine I think a good analogy is Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an alternate currency. To what point should it be regulated? Yes, you're free to use it, but there should be regulations on how you use it and how you exchange it. So having the financial institutions have some governance there, I think, is appropriate. With Google, all the various media platforms, I'm not saying they can't do what they're doing, but there should be some protections. Right now, there are no protections for individuals.
Jeff, isn't it a monopoly though?
It's hard how you define it, because a monopoly is from a business standpoint, no, but from a practical, competitive standpoint, it is, because there is no equivalent to Twitter. Twitter is its own thing because it's its own platform. Now, what is competition to Twitter? I mean, you have other platforms where you can communicate, but nothing is Twitter. If you have 25 million followers on Twitter, you may have 1 million followers on Facebook. It's its own little ecosystem. So,
but Parler is like that. So, how do you distinguish between Instagram, Facebook, Parler, Twitter?
Mine, MeWe, BitChute.
I mean,
well, again, these are platforms. So you say that one platform competes with another platform. How does that? You can't. It's like an apples to oranges comparison. That being said, I think every platform should have certain, rights, like a digital citizen rights, where anyone who participates in the platform is given certain basic rights, like the right to appeal. If the account's been shut down, there should be an appeal right, where there is a process where things are reviewed by a human, and that there's actually a decision that can be gone through a chain where it's actually considered and not just canceled by a bot. I mean, I've seen a lot of things on YouTube, for example, where people who post either pro-Republican or pro-Democrat things, and they show clips of other people. They get DRM notified. Their channels get striked, and they have to take down the media when it basically was commentary. It was fair use, but because the system is in place the way it is, they can be censored through mechanisms that don't really have an appeal process, or effective appeal process. So again, I think the issue is that Twitter has such its own terms of service. That's fine as a company and as a service, but then again, from a practical standpoint, what are the alternatives? Because we don't really have an appeal process for private companies. And the same thing is again, I'm an advocate for right to repair. It's at what point do the phones we own become our property, or just something that we use, but really all the innards belong to whomever.
Well, I mean, Jeff, it's kind of like if you remember back in the 80s or early 90s, when you bought a computer, I think Packard Bell was notorious for this.
And I think
and Compaq was, where if you opened up if you unscrewed the backs and they got a little tab that when you pull the chassis out, you voided the warranty. And that's it's back then, what is it, about a good PC was almost $2,000 or $1,000, definitely I think it was like $2,000 with a Super VGA monitor. But it's that's where it's kind of it's like, are we leasing the computer then, or it's my computer? I should be allowed to do whatever. It's like when I buy a car, I can open it up and I can take stuff out, put stuff on. If I was more talented like Sparkplug, I could put a supercharger and do an engine swap and all that other stuff. Then that's how it should be with computers. I should.
Let's say we have a Bill of Rights established in the Constitution. For our rights, but that doesn't really translate very well to the digital age, where
Mhm.
who we are is not just our person; it's our persona. It's who we are in our platforms, and that has some, in my opinion, requires some degree of protection, because
Mhm.
you can have that part of you bullied. You could have it taken away from you. You spend time, resources, money developing this stuff, and to have some platform say, well, sorry, we feel like your platform is not, or your content is not appropriate, and then all your resources are vanished. The same thing happens in, like, sometimes even video games. People play video games, they spend all this
Oh
digital
yeah,
currency, they get all these assets, and the game goes away, and then what are they left with? I mean, there are a
yeah.
lot of cases to be made
That's
for
why
some
that's,
level of
don't get me
rights.
started on that, because Steam really infuriates me and gets me steam, so to speak. I liked it back when I used to be able to go. Hold on a second, I'm going to show you.
Never know. What's this Dwight reference coming now?
Yes.
I can't wait.
See, back in the days, I was able to buy the game, and I own this. Now, if I want to get, by the way, great game, Jolyn. You might want to get the kids involved in Civilization. Great game. Grant will love that
I'll
game.
just borrow yours.
Yeah.
By all means. I've
My
already
son likes playing this a lot.
But my point is, I own this. Now with streaming services like Steam, if Steam goes out of business, all my games go away. I don't own those games anymore. I'm leasing these.
Technically, you don't even own that, because here's the thing: if you were to own that, then you could do whatever you wanted to with that. But you have limited rights, and even if you, like, people say, like, for example, you had a CD. It's like, you don't own the music on the CD; you just own the CD. Well, if that's the case, if the CD is scratched, why do you charge me full price for replacing it? You should charge me the cost for their plastic. But they don't, and that's hypocrisy too. But again, it's just like, I can go on. It's just that
Yeah.
I know,
I think
but this is
there's
about
enough.
Right. Right. I mean, and the thing is I mean, yeah, I think we're kind of just gone way off the reservation.
yeah, no, but this is really about is the First Amendment, silencing people's First Amendment rights. And
Yeah.
and there's no distinction, sorry, I can't talk today. There's no distinction between, well, clearly there is. If you're a Democrat, you can say whatever you want. You can cite whatever violence you want. We can watch, police precincts burn up in smoke, and cruisers,
We
police
tell people to get in.
burned. We can watch them tear down statues. We can watch them literally do all the things, kill people, kill police officers, do all this thing, murder people. And clearly that's acceptable. But if President Trump wants to go and,
But
and
Joey,
say something, he's not able to, by silencing his First Amendment rights and removing him from all these different platforms without any sort of notice. Most of us, well, I haven't been, but most other people who are Trump supporters have, when they're on Facebook and they say something that Facebook deems to be inappropriate, they are putting them in Facebook jail.
Yep.
Right? So why didn't President Trump get to be in Facebook jail like the rest of us?
No, that's a good point. I like that.
Basically gave him
and
the death penalty.
The thing too is just about the Facebook jail, from what I've heard from friends, and you've probably seen this maybe more, Joey Lynn. It's just that there is an appeal process, but a lot of times people actually wind up getting out of jail before they get their appeal heard anyway. They don't even have it's one of those kooky things of, like, there's a time limit of how long they're going to be locked out of the platform, but they never really get a chance to fully argue and get anybody to really arbitrate what they are. It happens. They're off for a while and they come back, but people deserve a right to get more of a voice with this, right?
That's the point. Yeah, same thing with Twitter too. You got Twitter jail, where it's like you're not really banned, but you're silenced and people don't really see your posts. So you don't even realize it until people say, hey, I have not been seeing your stuff. So it's like, it's the silent stuff that's like, you don't even realize it's happening until, your audience has to tell you, hey, we're not seeing your content. It happens on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. I don't know about Instagram or other platforms, but at least those three, definitely.
I mean, but we have watched that journalist, Pearl, I don't remember his first name, literally get beheaded. Right?
Pearl. Yeah.
And isn't that awful? I mean, that is horrific, heinous, awful behavior. And that was allowed to be seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But President Trump can't say what he thinks or feels. And, there was a little bit of a lag time with his tweets and stuff.
And here's something
When
else.
he had something to say, they wouldn't publish what he was saying in his tweets.
And here's something else, Jolyn. Do you remember that whole outcry when Barack Obama told everyone to get into the faces of his opponents, basically get into your relatives that don't support Obamacare's faces? Do you remember that outcry? I don't either. And the fake
Maxine
outrage.
Waters did the same thing.
Yeah, don't let them don't tell them they're not welcome here. They shouldn't be able to eat in peace. You see them in public harassed. I mean, something. If you or I said that, what would happen to us, Jolyn? We'd be up the creek without the paddle, so to speak, and without the boat for us.
I'm just saying that this is ridiculous behavior by those big tech companies, and they literally silenced Parler. And they
put them out of
cannot
business.
do that.
Yep.
They cannot do that. I mean, I'm a huge proponent of capitalism and sharing different platforms, but this is absolutely unconstitutional, and this is bad for every American.
And Jolyn, it'd be one thing if Parler failed in the marketplace, and let's say they just didn't get the traction that they needed, and they went out of business. That'd be one thing. But this is they're putting their thumb on the scale. They're basically just cutting off their legs. It'd be like, let's say, let's take my favorite example, Standard Oil. They controlled all the upstream. They controlled the oil that came out of the ground to the refineries, and they owned the gas stations. Back then, they had corporately owned gas stations. Actually, that was after Standard Oil was broken up. It was the former Standard, the baby Standard Oil companies. But the point was that they controlled up and downstream, right? And if there was a couple of independent oil companies like the Sun Oil Company and Occidental Petroleum and a bunch of others like that. And they were relying, it's kind of like, actually, here's a better example. Hershey was the sole supplier of chocolate. They bought plantations in Cuba. It'd be like, let's say, if you wanted to get it, it's like when M&M Mars created the Mars bar, they had to go to Hershey to get the chocolate. And then if Milton Hershey said no more chocolate for you, then he's just effectively put M&M Mars out of business because there's no other place for him to get the chocolate. And that is what
you think about even earlier about, like, I think it was Westinghouse was one of the electric companies.
Yes, Westinghouse.
And they had they controlled electricity, from distribution down to the home. Basically, they controlled all of it, and they were a private company. So I don't support oligarchies. I don't think there should be government companies. But at the same point, every company that has a service that offers to the public should have a certain level of rights for the individuals. Any safety rights, the right for non-discrimination of service. Whatever. I mean, those should be basic rights that extend to all services that are provided by any company, whether it's a, online media company or whatever. You should not be able to discriminate based upon certain,
I mean, here's the thing. We get our electricity from Pepco, right? Would there not be an outcry if Pepco said, we don't like you Democrats. You keep wanting to regulate us. You don't let the mergers happen that we want to do. We're going to cut power to every Democrat's house. Until
you guys can't because they're regulated.
Exactly. And that what Google, what Amazon did to Parler is they basically choked them off. Apple said and Google said you're not going to sell your stuff. And Amazon said we're going to just foreclose on your building, even though you've been paying your rent on time and everything. You're being kicked out of your building, and that is what's happening. And the fact that the typical the run-of-the-mill your Bill Clinton, JFK Democrat doesn't get this is really bad. It speaks to our failed education system.
How about this? Here's a great example of this, or just a great point, I think. So if they could, like Google and Facebook and Twitter and all of, whomever, whatever, if they could stop and prevent human trafficking and child pornography and all those awful sexual crimes to women and children, and sexual crimes to everyone, why don't they regulate that? Why don't they silence those people? Why don't they get rid of all of the human trafficking, sex trafficking, and pedophilia and all of that nasty, gross stuff that somehow is all over the internet? How about regulate that and silence that? You know, they're a private entity, and aren't they complicit in inciting rape and violence to children and sex trafficking of children and women?
Well, I'm sure we all heard about
Aren't
the
they
news about
complicit
a
in
certain,
that? I mean, aren't
about
they
a certain-
inciting
yeah.
violence with all of that? I mean, really, let's be honest about this. If you want to sit and talk about this, let's talk about it.
Well, I was gonna say, as far as trafficking goes, I mean, you've all heard of a certain hub, which has been, implicated for a lot of trafficking. That, again, it's a private company, but what rights do they have for the the welfare of individuals? What rights do they have? Even if you have like something as simple as like, hey, something was posted without my consent. What are your rights as a digital citizen to get that taken down? Not just on one platform, but across all platforms. There's a lot of
Yeah.
things here that I think need to be addressed, because these are increasingly vital issues in our current day and age.
Well, if they worked as hard to silence and to regulate and get rid of
President Trump.
of sexual crimes against women and children
Mhm.
and pedophilia and pornography and all that gross, disgusting stuff that Google and the rest of those big tech companies are somehow, they're condoning it and inciting it, clearly, because they're not doing anything about it. If they worked as hard on all of those issues, maybe we wouldn't have the issues that we have with sex trafficking and rape and violence against women and children. How about that?
Yeah.
If they would have worked as hard to get rid of all of that as they have with Trump, I mean, look at the things that we could do and accomplish.
Yeah,
They
this gets
hate
into-
President
yeah.
Trump, and they worked really hard to destroy him, or to try to destroy him, and they haven't been successful thus far.
And
Let's move on to something else. I mean, we're
Yes.
still, I think we've spent a lot of time on the subject, and it's been a great discussion. But I wanted to ask this question here too. President-elect Biden has unveiled his spending package for COVID relief. It came out to be about $1.9 trillion. It included a couple of things, particularly another $1,400 per person, on the stimulus.
hey, what about the 2,000? He was promising me
I was
$2,000.
1,400, we already had the 6, so it's
So that was President Trump.
some of the
can't do
Democrats
that.
are saying it should be another 2,000 altogether, $400 instead of $300 for the unemployment, and then stretch that all, benefits, and stretch that all the way into September. But also a $15 minimum wage.
Well, you know something?
Please
I don't-
tell me one thing. Where does the $15 minimum wage have to do with the COVID thing exactly? What's the relationship here?
Well, basically, because of COVID, a lot of restaurants like McDonald's are like, carry out only. They'll be able to replace and then bring in kiosks like the one by Shady Grove, where I go to when we used to meet in the studios to get my Shamrock shakes. By the way, it's we're like 6 weeks away from the Shamrock shakes coming back. By the way,
Nice.
breaking
I'll
news
have to
here.
make that a countdown figure on the list.
I think we should,
My
but or over by Goddard where I go, the McDonald's there, they only have one cashier and everything else is a kiosk. You go, you're in and out. And they don't, by the way, kiosks don't mess up your orders. Like when you tell somebody to do this, I think we had a former governor that had a comment, and he's not wrong.
There's a human that still has to fill the order.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I still get them wrong. I put my orders in digitally, and I still get them wrong.
really, I have
Yeah, absolutely.
when I do my what do you call, what is it I usually get? I usually get their cafe mocha with no whipped cream and
Soy milk?
they don't mess that up. They do not mess that up.
Yeah.
Well, good for you.
Yeah. But
So
my point is, what's going to happen is you're going to see unemployment. You go to $15 minimum wage. You're going to see people losing their jobs. I mean, this is an industry that's already hurting, the services industry. Those are the people that will be affected the most. Okay, people in my industry, in your industry, Joe Lynn's industry, Jeff's industry, we're not going to be affected really by 50 because no one wants to work for us for $15 an hour. I wish they did, but they don't.
So there is a huge wage gap. I know that, and the barriers from getting from like poverty to middle class to upper class. I mean, those bands are getting wider. The middle class they've been saying for a long time, the middle class is disappearing. It's hard to get, if you're not already in the system as far as, getting a good college education, getting a good job, you're really at a disadvantage through the rest of your life. So I'm sympathetic to the plight of people that can't make a living wage and don't have the resources to kind of get onto a track to get themselves into
Yeah.
a living wage. That being said, I wish I knew the solution. I mean, the thing is, I think pushing the minimum wage is a short-term solution. Eventually it just increases the whole thing. It's like inflation. It's just like if you give everyone a little bit more money, all it does is devalue the money. So at some point it's gonna come back to us, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, I don't know, but it's not a solution. It's just a band-aid, really.
I mean, Jeff, here's something, just a little food for thought. Back when you and I were in high school, you get a fully loaded Cadillac Brougham for about $25,000, fully decked out. You get all the features, right? You could buy living room furniture for about a really nice living room furniture for about $1,200. Okay, that's sofa, love seat, chair, all the works. You buy a
As
nice,
you often remind me, yes.
nice dining room set for about a couple thousand. But today, today a living room set is about 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. That is what the price of a car was back in the day. Back when you and I were in high school, you could get an Oldsmobile Cutlass for about $12,000. You could get a Chevy Chevrolet Celebrity for about 13,000. And if you got a Cavalier, you're talking below $10,000. You get a Chevy Cavalier. And I think it's just, I know they say we've had no inflation, but when that same Cavalier today is $25,000, well, I don't know if they make the Cavalier anymore, but if they did, it'd be about $25,000.
But
I don't know what those prices are in today's money as far as considering inflation.
I don't know. In cars, I mean, the thing is that cars are so much more complex than they were, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, with all the the computer chips and the whole thing, it's a whole different machine than it was when we were younger.
But sofas are still sofas, dining rooms are still dining rooms. I don't see any microchips in my.
Go to Costco. I know a lot of people. I mean, look, Costco is like, you can outfit yourself in clothing and do your home. It's unbelievable, what you can do at Costco. I mean,
but Costco's, they don't assemble the stuff. You got to assemble it yourself.
They don't sell. They sell. I mean, they sell a lot of sofas. The sofa comes as a sofa.
Well, but you need to put some stuff on.
It's not IKEA.
The same thing if you go to like Art Van or whatever, you still get the pieces. I mean, you don't have to hammer stuff together, but you still have to assemble it.
Like, I remember I bought something from Target, which I thought was going to be assembled, but I had to put it. It is a pain to put those kit things together.
Yeah, ready to assemble furniture. You get what you pay for. Okay. But I mean, the idea that, I understand, what you're saying, Jeff, because I think a lot of us still are concerned about how we get people a little bit more, equality, raise them up a little bit more. But, the minimum wage, people who work, in fast food outlets and things like that, those jobs were never meant to be careers, right? Being the cook and the cashier. And so you have basically the minimum wage was a kind of a training wage. And also allowed these operations, these outfits to charge a relatively decent price and still make some money. Yeah. But for businesses in the midst of a pandemic to be saddled with the potential that everybody's going to have to pay a $15 minimum wage at this point in time doesn't really make a lot of sense. And we've seen, not that Amazon employs a lot of people, not that they're a great employer the way they treat employees. There's lots of stories about that. But the pandemic and a lot of other things have pushed wages up at Target, at Walmart, at Amazon, and they're floating towards that $15 and above kind of a scenario on their own because of supply and demand issues, that have gone there. Mm-hmm. And there are certain people who don't want to work, anymore because of COVID. We have so many issues. But, it just makes me wonder what exactly, Biden's team was thinking about by doing this. I know minimum wage is a huge deal for the Democrats, but throwing $15 out versus yet another incremental increase or a scale of saying, it just seems to be a little bit short-sighted. And, and $2 trillion, do we all need this? I think, we talked on this show before, not with the same necessarily group here, about, do we need, does the middle class, most people in the middle class, do they need more relief like that? Or should the stimulus money, relief money, be more targeted to those who really do need it, right?
Mhm.
This is
I
the thing.
appreciate it, but I don't need it. I
They've
mean,
had that one size fits all strategy. Everybody gets it, but everybody doesn't need it, and there are people who need it more than we do.
And here's the thing
It's
also,
a form of socialism, actually.
what's that?
Form of
It's like
socialism.
socialism
It
where
is. It's
y'all
the
get it
this is
instead of
Andrew
targeting
Yang's
really need
universal wage. Universal income. That's what.
Well, that's what Andrew Yang is. I mean, I guess he's launched his bid for mayor. That's one of his things now, right? He's going to put that into his platform as the mayor of New York.
Yeah, so it's really funny how loose these Democrats are with other people's money. And the only reason I say that is Kamala Harris did a Toys for Tots drive, much like the Republican Club and the Republican Party and the Women's Federation did in Montgomery County. Okay, I know she only has a handful of people in her office, and and she was really happy that they got 15 toys or something, like 15 or 30 toys. So it was like, I mean, we had over 5,000 pieces of toys when we did it. It was just a little old Republican Party. You don't think Kamala Harris could have wrote a check to U.S. Marine Corps Toys for Tots drive to buy 1,500 pieces, 15,000 pieces, 1,500 pieces of toys for Toys for Tots? No, she could have, but she's basically just like a Democrat. They're very generous with other people's money, I think the only exception to that rule might be Nancy Pelosi. But then again, she spent that money on herself, so I don't know if it's really being generous when you spend $30 for a pint of ice cream. Was it $30 or $15 for her ice cream that she has?
She has some pretty expensive ice cream. All right,
Well,
we're at
it's
5
getting
minutes
to the point.
here.
But then, Joe,
I was just going to say it's getting to the point where people are going to decide what is essential and what's non-essential. If you got a wage of $15 an hour, people are not going to go out to eat as much. And, they're not going to go out get their nails done or their hair done, or, they're not going to buy a luxury car. They're going to buy, something cheaper, or they're just not going to do it because middle class family are not going to be able to, they're not going to be able to afford it. Or if they can afford it, they're going to make different choices and say, oh, well, you know what? I just don't need it that bad.
and
Or
here's the
that
thing.
much.
And $15 an hour is roughly about $30,000 a year, something around that, maybe a little less, maybe a hair more. But that's exactly what I made when I was working for Don Irvine, $30,000 a year in 1996. And
I overpaid you.
I was able to save. I was able to look. It was like I was able to do some savings. What I didn't do, I didn't eat out. I didn't drive my car nearly as much. I used mass transit, and I basically didn't go see movies every week and stuff like that. Nor did I have cable TV because I didn't want to pay for cable TV because I was really not home enough to watch it. And that's what it comes down to. It's like these people, they feel that cable TV is a right. Oh, I gotta have broadband internet. Next thing we know, the government's gonna start handing out iPhones because everyone needs a smartphone. They can't have a flip
They already
phone
do.
anymore. Didn't the president stop that?
Oh, well, Obama had it. I don't know about, I don't
Yeah,
think,
I thought the
it,
president
but,
stopped
I mean,
it.
you've got, Obama, Biden, times 3 now. Got an
Mhm.
extension of, Obama's presidency. So
Yeah.
All right,
Wow, that was
Dwight,
a
I think
fast
it's time
one.
for final thoughts.
Yeah, final thoughts. Let's start with Joey Lynn. Final thoughts.
oh gosh, you should have went to someone else. My final
Okay.
thought.
You want me to come back? I can come back to you, Joey Lynn.
Yeah,
We're
back
very
to-
in the for. We'll go to Jeff the Thing Thornton.
all right.
Final thoughts.
Well, I'll go back to something I've said before. I hate partisan politics because there is no compromise in those things. That being said, I still am a firm believer that, the Republican Party has something to offer every single person. Part of it is just understanding what people's needs are. But I think some of the core values of the Republican Party are like, independence, individuality. I hate to say pulling yourself up by bootstraps, but giving people the opportunity to make a life for themselves on their own terms, giving them the tools and opportunities to do so, helping people get out of a situation into a better situation. So things like poverty and those things are not continual life stories. Like they entitle people to get out of that into a way that they can actually support themselves and others. So I think that is a great message. And I think that's what has drawn me and what keeps me drawn to that. I hate when we devolve into, issues that are like personal issues that really don't affect most people day in and day out. I mean, we can argue about, you know, pro-life versus pro-choice, but that doesn't really affect people's living. You know, poverty affects people how they live. You know, welfare, those kind of things affect people's daily lives. So I'd rather find solutions that affect people, you know, where they live, um, so to speak. And I think that once we get past those issues, we'll have plenty of time to discuss the finer points of where, you know, we disagree. But that being said, you know, this another end of a week. Be good to each other. You know, this is the best thing we can do to show unity is to not, you know, to speak with our mouths, not with our fists. You know, really give the other person a chance to be heard, understood. Um, you know, show compassion. Let's show that we, um, the bigger party, as far as we able to take what's, you know, what's given to us and still roll with the punches and still come out with a great message. So I got.
Don, Mr. Fantastic.
All right. One of the things that I want to talk about here was just so the Arizona Republican Party apparently is seriously considering at their upcoming meeting to censure Governor Ducey, Cindy McCain, and then former Senator Jeff Flake. Now, my son lives out in Arizona, and he thinks the whole thing is it's a kind of a big mess out there, and I kind of agree. What maybe people, some Republicans don't like the governor, they don't like Cindy McCain, or they don't like Jeff Flake, but I just see this as a problem of the party, the Republican Party, in many places around the country. We're spending a lot of time fighting amongst ourselves. What is this really going to accomplish? The problem in Arizona, they lost the state. Trump did not win the state. We lost the Senate seat. The trends are not going in their favor for the Republican Party. They need to work really more about getting those votes out and taking back the Senate seats and getting the state back for the next president, the Republican president, rather than worrying about censuring these particular people. It was only going to divide and fracture the party even more. We've just gone through a period where we're seeing with this impeachment how we had 10 Republicans join the Democrats to vote for impeachment. We're having these problems. We need to bring our Republican Party together. We do not need these divisive things. No matter how you feel about these people, you still need to have this divisiveness right now, especially in light of all that. And Kelly Ward is running for re-election as the state party chair. I have no idea if she's going to win, but a lot of people will look to the fact of how the elections went, and they did not go favorably. So she may be on the hot seat. Maybe she won't win. I don't know if she's got a challenger, but it's probably probably doesn't look all that great for her for another term.
Okay, my final thoughts. I've got a couple as usual. My first final thought is one. Here we are. It is January 15th, 2021 is 2 weeks old, and I just want to say, it's so far it's been a very happy new year, minus, the lawbreakers we saw last week, but it's life, But I do want to say one thing, Senator Gillibrand went on a mad tear on Fox News with Neil Cavuto, where she said, if these were black people, they would have opened fire on them. And that's what they should have done to these. And honestly, Senator Gillibrand, it's taking you 50 years, but thank you for coming around to supporting President Nixon's policy on Kent State. Thank you, Senator Gillibrand. You and President Nixon, Republican, share the exact same views on how to deal with riotous mobs. Let that sink in for a little while, Senator Gillibrand. And my other final thought is, I want to say, it's really great what's going on. I've seen in the midst of all this part, I have seen some glimmers of hope, of kindness, of people, Democrats and Republicans, conservatives and liberals working together. And I've seen that scene where I've got a neighbor who's a Republican and a neighbor that's a Democrat. The Democrat lost heat, and the Republican invited him and his family into their house to get warm while their heater was being fixed. That's something you don't see every day. That's a good thought to have. People taking care of, and these are people they do not like each other basically for the political side of things. But I'd like to know, would the Democrat have opened up her house for his family? because we're better people. But that's, and now we go to the finale of our final thoughts. Joey Invisible Girl Hoff.
Thank you. Well, it's always a pleasure to be on your show with all my rowdy friends. So my final thoughts are, I kind of feel like we're all to blame for what happened on January 6th. There's been, people have condoned the lawless behavior and accepted it. And, a crime is a crime. And if you do the crime, you have to do the time. No one is above the law. So I just think that we need to stay strong and healthy, and we need to continue to abide as law-abiding citizens, and we need to follow the Constitution and what our forefathers, the document that they made, because that's how we need to proceed in the future. That's what keeps us a good society, and it's the American dream. We're better than this. And the whole entire world has watched what happened on January 6th, and they're looking to us to be the strength and the power that we are. And we haven't been showing that. So we need to come together and we need to support each other. And all of us have the same basic human rights. We all want to be loved and liked and be happy and provide for our families. So stay strong and have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Join us again next week. We'll be back at the same time, 7 o'clock Friday night. And